They called her marked and unmarriageable, but beneath that wine-colored stain across her cheek lay a heart more beautiful than any unblemished face. The dusty platform of Willow Creek Station trembled under her worn boots as Martha Caldwell stepped down from the westbound train, her single carpet bag clutched tight against her chest like armor against the stairs that followed her everywhere. The September sun beat mercilessly on the wooden boards, and the air shimmered with heat that seemed to magnify every whispered judgment, every sideways glance at the birthmark that painted her left cheek in shades of deep burgundy from temple to jaw. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Your comment helps our community grow stronger. Thanks, and let's get back to the story. Martha had traveled 3 weeks from Ohio, carrying in her reticule a letter from Thomas Brennan, a rancher who had promised marriage to a woman of good character and gentle disposition. He had not asked for beauty, had not demanded perfection, and Martha had dared to hope that perhaps, finally, someone might see past the mark that had defined her entire 24 years of existence. But now, as she scanned the small crowd gathered at the station, she saw Thomas Brennan's face the moment he saw hers, watched his expression shift from hopeful anticipation to poorly concealed dismay, then to something worse, the polite, forced smile of a man trying to hide his revulsion. "Miss Caldwell," he said, his voice strained as he approached, hat in hand. Around them, the other passengers dispersed to waiting families and friends, leaving Martha standing alone on the platform like a piece of unwanted cargo. That is, there seems to have been some misunderstanding. The birthmark seemed to pulse with heat under his gaze, though Martha knew it was only her own blood rushing beneath skin that had never known a kind touch. She had learned long ago to keep her chin high despite the stares, to speak clearly despite the shame that always threatened to strangle her voice. "Mr. Brennan, I received your letter accepting my correspondence. I have your address, your requirements for a wife." Thomas Brennan was not an unkind man. She could see that in the way his hands worried at his hat brim, in the genuine distress that creased his weathered features. But kindness and acceptance were different things entirely, as Martha had learned through countless disappointed suitors and well-meaning relatives who insisted her inner beauty would someday matter more than her outer appearance. "Miss Caldwell, you seem like a fine woman, truly, but I have a position to maintain in this community. I cannot." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Martha had heard variations of these words her entire life, had seen this same expression on the faces of men who had initially shown interest until they met her in person. The birthmark was not something that could be hidden or disguised, not something that faded into the background once someone got to know her better. It was always there, always the first thing people noticed, always the reason why she was not quite good enough for marriage, for love, for the simple acceptance she had spent her whole life craving. "I see," she said quietly, though the words felt like stones in her throat. Around them, the normal sounds of the small frontier town continued, horses neighing, wagon wheels creaking, children laughing somewhere in the distance, but Martha felt as though she stood in a bubble of silence, isolated and exposed. "Then I suppose I should inquire about the next train back east." But even as she spoke the words, Martha knew she could not return to Ohio. Her aunt's house, where she had lived since her parents' death 10 years ago, had been sold to pay debts. Her few remaining relatives had made it clear that her departure west was a relief, one less mouth to feed, one less unmarriageable woman to worry about. She had spent her last savings on the train ticket and new dress, had burned her bridges as thoroughly as any pioneer seeking a new life on the frontier. "Now, Miss Caldwell," Thomas Brennan said, his voice taking on the false brightness of a man eager to assuage his guilt, "surely there are other opportunities for a woman of that is, with your skills. You mentioned in your letter that you have experience with healing herbs, with tending the sick." Martha nodded, though the gesture felt wooden. Her mother had been a midwife and herbalist, had taught Martha the properties of plants, and the gentle art of healing before consumption took her when Martha was only 14. It was knowledge that had served her well in her aunt's household, where she had tended everything from childhood fevers to difficult births among the neighboring families. But such skills hardly seemed relevant when she had nowhere to sleep tonight, and less than $5 to her name. "Dr. Harrison is always in need of assistance," Thomas continued, clearly eager to find a solution that would ease his conscience. "He runs the medical practice here in town, serves folks for miles around. A capable woman who knows something of healing. Well, you could use someone like that." The suggestion felt like charity, like the kind of helpful gesture that allowed people to feel good about their cruelty while changing nothing of its essential nature. But Martha was in no position to refuse any possibility, no matter how remote or unlikely. She gathered what remained of her dignity around her like a threadbare shawl and nodded. "Where might I find Dr. Harrison?" Thomas Brennan gave her directions to the doctor's office, located above the Mercantile on Main Street, and offered to carry her bag, an offer she politely declined. She had learned to carry her own burdens, literal and otherwise. As she walked away from the station, she could feel the eyes of the small crowd following her, could hear the whispered conversations that began the moment she was beyond polite earshot. This was nothing new, but it never became easier, the way curiosity and pity followed her like shadows. Willow Creek was larger than she had expected, with a proper main street lined with businesses and homes that spoke of prosperity and permanence. The mercantile occupied a prominent corner, its painted sign advertising everything from dry goods to farming implements. A narrow staircase on the side of the building led to the second floor, where a smaller sign simply read Dr. E. Harrison, physician. Martha climbed the stairs slowly, her legs suddenly heavy with exhaustion that had little to do with travel and everything to do with the crushing weight of disappointment that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. The door at the top of the stairs stood slightly ajar, and through it came the sound of someone moving about, the clink of glass against glass, the rustle of papers. Martha knocked softly, then waited, her hand still clutching her carpetbag as though it might somehow anchor her to hope. "Come in," called a voice from within, and Martha pushed the door open to reveal a surprisingly spacious room that served as both office and examination area. Shelves lined the walls, filled with bottles and jars and medical texts, and sunlight streamed through clean windows to illuminate a space that felt more like a sanctuary than a place of business. At a desk near the far window sat a man of perhaps 35 years, his dark hair slightly mussed as though he had been running his hands through it, his shirt sleeves rolled up as he worked over what appeared to be patient records. He looked up as she entered, and Martha braced herself for the familiar sequence of expressions, the momentary surprise followed by polite but distant professionalism. Instead, Dr. Harrison simply nodded and gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Please, have a seat. How can I help you today?" There was something different in his manner, something that took Martha a moment to identify. He had noticed the birthmark, of course, she could tell by the brief flicker of his eyes across her face, but there was no lingering stare, no poorly concealed shock or pity. It was as though he had cataloged it as simply another physical characteristic, no more or less significant than the color of her hair or the shape of her nose. "My name is Martha Caldwell," she began, settling her bag at her feet and folding her hands in her lap to keep them from trembling. "I have just arrived from Ohio, and I find myself in need of employment. Mr. Thomas Brennan suggested you might have use for someone with experience in healing arts." Dr. Harrison set down his pen and gave her his full attention, his gray eyes thoughtful and kind. "What sort of experience do you have, Miss Caldwell?" For the first time in hours, Martha felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. This was familiar ground, something she could speak of with confidence rather than shame. "My mother was a midwife and herbalist. She taught me to identify and prepare medicinal plants, to assist with childbirth, to tend fevers and wounds. I have been the primary caregiver for my aunt's household for the past 10 years, treating everything from childhood ailments to more serious injuries among the neighboring families." "Formal training?" he asked, not dismissively but with the genuine interest of a professional seeking to understand her qualifications. "None," Martha admitted. "Only what my mother taught me, and what I have learned through experience. I understand that may not be sufficient for your needs." Dr. Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying her with an expression she could not quite read. "Miss Caldwell, I am the only trained physician within 50 miles of Willow Creek. I serve ranching families, miners, townspeople, anyone who needs medical care across a territory that takes me days to traverse. I have been managing alone for 3 years, and I can tell you honestly that I would welcome competent assistance, particularly from someone with practical experience in healing." Hope began to flutter in Martha's chest, fragile as a bird's wing, but undeniably present. "You would consider employing me. I would consider training you properly," he corrected gently. "What you describe suggests a solid foundation, but medical knowledge is always expanding, and there are techniques and treatments you could learn that would make you even more valuable. The question is whether you would be interested in such an arrangement." Martha felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. In the space of an hour, she had gone from anticipated marriage to crushing rejection to the possibility of meaningful work, of using skills she had always valued but never imagined could provide her with independence. "Dr. Harrison, I would be very interested indeed, but I must be honest with you about my circumstances. I have nowhere to stay and very little money. I had expected. That is, my situation has changed rather suddenly." Understanding dawned in his eyes, and with it came something that looked remarkably like anger, though not directed at her. "Thomas Brennan sent you here after refusing to honor his commitment to you." It was not a question, and Martha saw no point in dissembling. "Yes." Dr. Harrison stood abruptly and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back as he looked out at the street below. For a long moment, he was silent, and Martha wondered if she had said something wrong, if her honesty had somehow damaged her chances. Then he turned back to her, his expression resolute. "Miss Caldwell, I can offer you employment as my medical assistant, with training in modern medical techniques and fair wages for your work. There is a small apartment behind the office that has been serving as storage but could be cleaned and furnished as living quarters. The arrangement would be entirely proper, with separate entrances and complete privacy. Would such an arrangement be acceptable to you?" Martha stared at him, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. "Dr. Harrison, such generosity. I cannot ask you to." "You are not asking," he interrupted firmly. "I am offering, because I have genuine need of your assistance, and because I believe you have much to contribute to the medical care of this community. There is nothing charitable about this arrangement, Miss Caldwell. I expect you to work hard, to learn quickly, and to earn every penny of your wages." The firmness in his voice, the respect inherent in his expectations, moved Martha more than any kindness she had ever received. Here was someone who saw her as capable, who valued her skills, who offered her the chance to build a life based on her abilities rather than her appearance. When would you like me to begin? Tomorrow morning, if you are amenable. Today, I suggest you rest and settle into the apartment. Mrs. Peterson at the mercantile downstairs can provide you with basic furnishings and supplies, and I will advance you enough to cover immediate expenses. He returned to his desk and pulled out a key from the top drawer. The apartment entrance is around back. It is not luxurious, but it is clean and private. Martha accepted the key with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear but from the overwhelming relief of safety, of possibility, of hope restored when she had thought it lost forever. Dr. Harrison, I do not know how to thank you. Prove to me that my confidence in you is well placed, he replied simply. That will be thanks enough. As Martha made her way around to the back of the building and unlocked the door to what would be her new home, she felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of the tight knot of shame and disappointment that had lived there for so long. The apartment was small but bright, with windows that looked out on a little garden where herbs grew wild among the weeds. It was not the life she had imagined when she boarded the train in Ohio, but perhaps it was something better, a life where she might be valued for who she was rather than dismissed for who she was not. That evening, as she arranged her few belongings in the little apartment and planned what she would need to make it truly habitable, Martha found herself thinking not of Thomas Brennan's rejection, but of the respect she had seen in Dr. Harrison's eyes, the way he had spoken to her as an equal, a colleague, someone whose knowledge and skills mattered. It was a new feeling, this sense of professional worth, and she discovered she liked it very much indeed. The next morning dawned clear and cool, with the first hint of autumn in the air. Martha dressed carefully in her most practical dress, pinned her hair back neatly, and walked around to the front entrance of the medical office with a lightness in her step that had been absent for longer than she cared to remember. Dr. Harrison was already at work, preparing supplies for what he explained would be a visit to a ranch family whose youngest child had taken ill. This will be an excellent opportunity for you to observe, he said as he packed instruments and medications into a leather bag. The McAllister Ranch is about an hour's ride from town, and young Tommy has been running a fever for 3 days. His mother is competent with basic care, but she is worried enough to send for professional help. Martha nodded, grateful for the chance to begin her new role with a case that would allow her to learn by watching rather than being expected to perform immediately. As they made their way to the livery stable where Dr. Harrison kept his horse and buggy, she noticed the curious glances from townspeople, but they felt different now. Less like judgment and more like simple interest in the new person who would be working alongside their respected physician. The ride to the McAllister Ranch gave Martha her first real look at the country surrounding Willow Creek, rolling hills covered in autumn grass that rippled like water in the morning breeze, stands of cottonwood trees already beginning to turn golden along the creek beds, mountains rising in the distance like blue shadows against the sky. It was beautiful in a way that was entirely different from the green farmland of Ohio, wilder and more open, full of possibilities that seemed to stretch as far as the horizon. Tell me about your mother's methods, Dr. Harrison said as they traveled, his attention divided between the road and their conversation. What did she teach you about treating fevers in children? Martha found herself relaxing as she described her mother's careful approach to childhood illnesses, the way she had combined herbal remedies with close observation and careful nursing. Dr. Harrison listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed he took her knowledge seriously, that he saw value in the traditional methods even as he sought to supplement them with modern medical techniques. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman, he said when Martha finished describing a particularly difficult case involving a young boy with pneumonia. Many of the old remedies have real merit, and some of what we call modern medicine is simply a refined version of treatments that have been used for centuries. The validation in his words warmed Martha in a way she had not expected. Her mother's knowledge had always been dismissed by the more educated members of their Ohio community, treated as folklore or superstition rather than genuine medical skill. To have a trained physician acknowledge its value felt like a kind of vindication, not just of her own abilities, but of her mother's memory. The McAllister Ranch was a modest but well-maintained spread, with a neat farmhouse surrounded by outbuildings and corrals where horses grazed in the morning sun. Mrs. McAllister met them at the door, a capable-looking woman in her 30s with worry lines etched deep around her eyes and flour, still dusting her apron from morning baking. Dr. Harrison, thank goodness you have come, she said, ushering them into a kitchen that smelled of fresh bread and the sharp scent of vinegar used for cleaning. Tommy is no better this morning, and his fever seems higher than yesterday. This is Miss Caldwell, my new assistant, Dr. Harrison said as he set down his medical bag. She has considerable experience with childhood illnesses and will be helping me with Tommy's care. Mrs. McAllister nodded politely to Martha, her attention clearly focused on her sick child rather than on social niceties, which Martha appreciated. They followed her to a small bedroom, where 6-year-old Tommy McAllister lay listless against his pillows, his cheeks flushed with fever and his breathing slightly labored. Martha stood back as Dr. Harrison conducted his examination, watching as he listened to the boy's chest, felt for swollen glands, checked his throat and ears with instruments she had never seen before. She noted how gentle he was with the frightened child, how he explained each step of the examination in terms Tommy could understand, how he managed to be thorough without being frightening. The fever is significant, Dr. Harrison said quietly to Mrs. McAllister, but his lungs are clear and his throat shows no sign of serious infection. I believe this is likely a common childhood fever that will resolve with proper care. He turned to Martha then, including her in the consultation in a way that both surprised and pleased her. Miss Caldwell, what would your mother have recommended for a fever of this nature? Martha felt a moment of nervousness as both Dr. Harrison and Mrs. McAllister looked to her for an answer, but then her training took over, the knowledge her mother had instilled in her through years of careful teaching. Willow bark tea to reduce the fever, cool compresses for comfort, and most importantly, frequent small sips of water or broth to prevent the dangerous drying that can come with high fevers. Also, keeping the room cool and the child lightly covered, despite the natural inclination to bundle him warmly. Dr. Harrison nodded approvingly. Excellent advice. Mrs. McAllister, Miss Caldwell has described exactly the treatment I would recommend, with one addition. He opened his medical bag and withdrew a small bottle. This is a precise preparation of the same compound found in willow bark, measured to provide the proper dose for a child of Tommy's age and weight. Combined with the other measures Miss Caldwell described, it should bring his fever down within the next day or two. As they prepared the medicine and showed Mrs. McAllister how to administer it, Martha felt a deep satisfaction in the work, in the way her knowledge combined with Dr. Harrison's training to provide better care than either could have offered alone. When little Tommy managed a weak smile in response to her gentle reassurance, she felt something that had been missing from her life for years, a sense of purpose, of being truly needed and valued. The ride back to town passed quickly, filled with Dr. Harrison's questions about other cases she had handled, other remedies she had learned. By the time they reached Willow Creek, Martha felt as though she had found not just employment but a calling, a way to use her skills that gave meaning to all the years of study and practice under her mother's guidance. Over the following weeks, Martha settled into a routine that brought her more satisfaction than she had ever imagined possible. She rose early to organize supplies and prepare for the day's patients, spent her mornings learning new techniques and treatments from Dr. Harrison, her afternoons assisting with examinations and procedures, her evenings studying the medical texts he lent her and practicing the skills he taught her. The townspeople of Willow Creek were initially curious about the new assistant, but they quickly came to accept and even appreciate her presence. Martha's gentle manner with children, her skill with women's ailments, her knowledge of traditional remedies, all proved valuable in ways that had nothing to do with her appearance. For the first time in her life, she was known for what she could do rather than how she looked, and the transformation in her confidence was remarkable. Dr. Harrison proved to be not just a skilled physician but a patient and thorough teacher. He never made her feel ignorant for not knowing something, never dismissed her questions or suggestions, always treated her as a colleague worthy of respect. Under his guidance, she learned to use medical instruments, to recognize symptoms and conditions she had never encountered, to prepare medicines with precision and care. More importantly, she learned to see herself as he saw her, as a competent professional whose skills were valuable, whose presence made a real difference in the lives of their patients. The birthmark that had defined her entire life gradually became simply another feature, no more significant than the color of her eyes or the sound of her laugh. It was during a particularly challenging case, a difficult breech birth at a remote ranch, that Martha first realized how much she had changed. As she worked alongside Dr. Harrison through the long night, using every skill her mother had taught her combined with everything she had learned in recent weeks, she caught sight of her reflection in the bedroom window and was startled to see not the marked, shameful woman she had always believed herself to be, but a confident professional whose face showed purpose and capability. The baby was born healthy after hours of careful work, and as Martha cleaned and swaddled the infant while Dr. Harrison tended to the exhausted but grateful mother, she felt a deep sense of completion. This was who she was meant to be, not someone's reluctant wife chosen for convenience, but a healer in her own right, valued for her skills and knowledge. You did excellent work tonight, Dr. Harrison said quietly as they packed their supplies in the pre-dawn darkness. I could not have managed that delivery without your assistance. Martha looked up at him in surprise. Dr. Harrison, surely you. I am quite serious, Miss Caldwell. Your knowledge of traditional birthing techniques, combined with your calm presence and skilled hands, made the difference between a difficult birth and a dangerous one. You have become an invaluable partner in this practice. The word partner sent a warm glow through Martha's chest. She had never been anyone's partner before, had never been seen as essential rather than merely tolerated. As they drove back to town through the growing light of dawn, she found herself thinking not about the past or even the uncertain future, but about the present moment, about the satisfaction of work well done and the respect of someone whose opinion mattered to her. It was perhaps inevitable that her feelings for Dr. Harrison would deepen beyond professional respect and gratitude. He was a kind man, intelligent and dedicated, with a gentle humor that made even the most difficult days bearable. More than that, he was the first person who had ever seen her clearly, who valued her for exactly who she was without any desire to change or improve her. But Martha was careful to keep these feelings to herself. Dr. Harrison had given her employment and dignity when she desperately needed both, and she would not repay his kindness by making their professional relationship uncomfortable with unwelcome romantic attention. She had learned to be grateful for what she had rather than yearning for what seemed impossible. The change in their relationship began so gradually that Martha almost missed it. Small things at first, Dr. Harrison asking her opinion not just on medical matters, but on practice management, seeking her advice on supply orders and scheduling. Then larger things, inviting her to review and comment on the medical journal articles he read, discussing complex cases with her as an equal rather than simply explaining his decisions. One autumn evening, as they worked late to prepare for a vaccination clinic the next day, Dr. Harrison looked up from the records he was organizing and said, quite unexpectedly, "Martha, may I speak frankly with you?" Something in his tone made her set down the vial she was arranging and give him her full attention. "Of course, Dr. Harrison. I have been thinking about our partnership," he began, then paused, seeming to search for the right words. "That is, about the nature of our working relationship and how it has evolved over these past months." Martha felt her heart begin to race, though she was not sure whether from hope or anxiety. "I hope my work has been satisfactory." "Your work has been far more than satisfactory," he interrupted gently. "Martha, in the months you have been here, you have transformed not just this practice but this entire community's access to quality medical care. More than that, you have." He paused again, running a hand through his hair in the gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of his uncertainty. "You have transformed my understanding of what it means to truly see another person." Martha stared at him, scarcely daring to interpret the meaning behind his words. "Dr. Harrison, Ethan," he said softly. "My name is Ethan, and I would very much like you to use it, because what I am trying to say to you has nothing to do with our professional relationship and everything to do with the fact that I have come to care for you deeply. Not as my assistant, but as the remarkable woman you are." The world seemed to tilt around Martha, all her careful assumptions about her place in his life suddenly shifting like sand beneath her feet. "Ethan, you cannot mean." "I mean that somewhere in the midst of working beside you, watching you comfort frightened children and ease the pain of their parents, seeing your intelligence and compassion and quiet strength, I have fallen completely and irrevocably in love with you." His gray eyes were steady on hers, honest and vulnerable in a way that took her breath away. "I know I have no right to speak of such things, that you came here seeking employment, not romance, but I could not continue working beside you every day without telling you how I feel." Martha felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness or shame as they had been so often in her life. These were tears of wonder, of joy so intense it was almost painful. "Ethan, the birthmark. What about it?" he asked, his voice genuinely puzzled. The simple question, asked without guile or pretense, broke something open in Martha's chest that had been locked tight for 24 years. He truly did not see the mark as a defect or disfigurement, had never seen it as anything more than another aspect of her physical appearance. No more significant than the freckles across her nose or the laugh lines beginning to form at the corners of her eyes. "All my life," she whispered, "I have been defined by this mark. Every opportunity, every relationship, every hope I have ever had has been shaped by other people's reaction to it. I do not know how to believe that you truly see past it." Ethan rose from his chair and came around the desk to where she sat, kneeling beside her chair so that his eyes were level with hers. "Martha, I need you to understand something. When I look at you, I see the woman who stayed up all night with the Henderson baby when he had croup, who taught Mrs. Williams to manage her husband's diabetes, who held Mary Patterson's hand during her first childbirth and made her feel brave. I see someone whose knowledge has prevented suffering, whose gentleness has brought comfort, whose presence has made me a better physician and a better man." He reached up and touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the edge of the birthmark with a tenderness that made her tremble. "This mark is part of you, and I love every part of you. But it does not define you any more than the color of your hair or the sound of your voice defines you. You are so much more than any single physical characteristic, and I am sorry that others have been too blind to see that." Martha leaned into his touch, feeling for the first time in her life that she was truly seen, truly known, truly valued for the totality of who she was. "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling both foreign and natural on her lips. "I have loved you for weeks, but I never dared to hope." "Hope," Ethan said firmly, rising to his feet and drawing her up with him. "Hope for everything, Martha. Hope for a marriage built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Hope for a partnership that encompasses both our personal and professional lives. Hope for a future where you never again doubt your worth or your beauty." As he gathered her into his arms and kissed her with a reverence that spoke of deep love rather than mere passion, Martha felt the last of her old fears and shame dissolve like morning mist in sunlight. She was not a woman marked by disfigurement, but a healer marked by compassion, not someone to be pitied or tolerated, but someone to be cherished and celebrated. Their wedding took place 2 months later in the little church at the center of Willow Creek, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Martha wore her mother's white lace dress, carefully preserved and altered to fit, and walked down the aisle not as a reluctant bride or a charitable case, but as a beloved woman taking her place beside the man who valued her exactly as she was. As they exchanged vows and voices clear and strong, promising to love and support each other in sickness and health, in joy and sorrow, Martha caught sight of Thomas Brennan among the congregation. The man who had rejected her at the train station now looked at her with something that might have been regret, though Martha found she felt nothing but gratitude for his earlier dismissal. Had he accepted her, she would never have discovered her true calling, never have found the work that gave her life meaning, never have met the man who saw her clearly and loved her completely. The reception was held in the town hall, with food provided by grateful patients and their families, with toasts and dancing and celebration that lasted well into the evening. As Martha danced with her new husband under the light of lanterns hung from the rafters, she realized that she had finally found her place in the world, not as someone who had overcome her flaws, but as someone who had discovered her strengths. In the months and years that followed, Dr. and Mrs. Harrison became fixtures in the Willow Creek community, their medical practice growing to serve an ever-widening area as word spread of their skill and compassion. Martha's knowledge of traditional remedies, combined with Ethan's formal training, created a unique approach to healing that drew patients from hundreds of miles away. More importantly, their marriage became a testament to the power of seeing beyond surface appearances to the deeper truths of character and worth. In a frontier community where survival often depended on looking past superficial differences to recognize genuine value, Martha and Ethan Harrison embodied the kind of love that saw clearly and loved completely. And if sometimes Martha caught her reflection in a window or mirror and noticed the wine-colored mark that had once defined her entire existence, she smiled to remember that it had led her exactly where she needed to be, to a life of purpose, a love built on mutual respect, and the deep satisfaction of being valued not despite her imperfections, but because of the unique combination of qualities that made her irreplaceably herself. The mark remained, as it always would, but it no longer carried the weight of shame or limitation. Instead, it had become simply part of the story of Martha Harrison, healer and beloved wife. A woman who had learned that true beauty lies not in flawless features, but in the courage to offer your gifts to the world and the wisdom to recognize love when it sees you clearly and chooses you completely.